What do you get when you throw a pandemic into an advanced society? The birthing of a pointless podcast. We are the neighbors upstairs. What's going on, guys? It's the neighbor on the left, back with you here again for another episode of the Neighbors Upstairs. Unfortunately, neighbor on the right, righty, he won't be on the episode, but that will definitely change in the next week's episode. So we've actually tried to do this episode for quite some time now with this guest. This guest is someone that I know for years now. She's great and she does some cool things we're going to talk about. Her name is Cleopatra, and we'll talk to her about some things that she's interested in, like cosplay. Cleopatra, how are you today?
I'm good, Lefty. How about you?
I'm good. I'm not too bad. You know, it seems like it's getting a little bit better out there. They're saying less deaths from COVID. I'm optimistic. I'm a little bit optimistic. Talk to me. How has your life been? And you know what? Maybe talk to me about yourself. You know, who are you? What are some things that you are into? I know you for cosplay. Cosplay is like a really huge thing that you do or did do up until this year, every single year. I'm always on Instagram and I feel like you're constantly just showing us images of you as Harley Quinn. Can you talk to me about that? How'd you get into it?
Of course. Harley Quinn is my alter ego. No, I'm kidding. It's kind of funny that you actually posed that question because literally just the other day, Saturday night, actually, I had an old professor of mine who's actually around our age, who happens to be a really good friend of mine now. We were just talking and just catching up, and he goes, "So I see you cosplay." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "I'm intrigued. Do tell." I'm like, "What do you want to know?" And he actually pretty much asked the question, "Why Harley Quinn?" So I gave him a really well-worded response, pretty much just outlining all of Harley Quinn's qualities. Specifically Harley Quinn, I feel like she's very relatable to everybody. She relates to us little people. She's neither heroic nor villainous. She just is. You know, she's trying to figure herself out day in and day out. Kind of like, you know, similar to all of us. You know, we go to school, we live a pretty mundane lifestyle. We come home, we work, we go to school, all in an effort to achieve our career aspirations, our lifelong goals. Specifically with Harley Quinn, she reminds me of the parts that aren't spoken about. You know, a lot of people look at life in a very black and white manner. And I feel like oftentimes we sort of disregard this whole gray area that kind of balances things, in my opinion. And I pretty much, like, you know, while talking to this friend of mine, I pretty much said she loves passionately and unconditionally. She's unafraid of speaking her mind. And I'm like, yeah, she can be erratic at times, but that's what makes her relatable. You know, I feel like there's a small part of us that's slightly psychotic, if you will.
She's totally shades of gray. That's what I like about her as well.
Yes. She's neither black nor white. She's just gray.
An anti-hero, which...
Yes, an anti-hero.
It's
Precisely.
Exactly what we're all into, I believe, in the year 2020 and really the past 10 years. We're into the anti-hero. I'm a huge fan of Deadpool. You know, Righty's also a pretty huge fan of Deadpool. And it's kind of a commentary to life. This isn't the 1950s. We're not going for the picket white fence and the house and the garden and, you know, the perfect two kids per family kind of American dream. It's way more shades of gray than that. We're getting a little bit more complex, complicated. We've always been these complicated creatures. Now we have these superheroes and antiheroes kind of mirroring that. And I think that's really interesting.
Oh, for sure. I think she's emulating through her personality exactly what we're going through. You know, just like you said, she's an anti-hero. She's not a villain. She's not a hero. She's just in between, trying to figure herself out. And as a woman, I think she's amazing because she's multi-talented. She tries to be a lover and a fighter. And oftentimes I feel like society wants to put women in a box, people in general, but specifically my gender, you know, especially nowadays with the whole COVID-19 experience, and mothers who are full-time employees with kids. I'm sure they've on more than one occasion have felt inclined to choose their work life or their kids, because juggling everything simultaneously can become an issue. It can become very overwhelming. So I feel like as a woman, she's sometimes misunderstood or underestimated, but it's all about perseverance. It's all about willpower. It's all about pushing forward and striving for greatness. And I feel we can see a little bit of ourselves in her. And you know, you mentioned Deadpool. Deadpool is an anti-hero too. I feel like he's the male version of Harley Quinn in that respect. You know, he tries to do the, you know, good things, but ends up screwing up every so often. Kind of like Harley Quinn, you know?
Just to the point of Harley Quinn, I really enjoy the fact that you said what you just said about how women have to kind of pick in the society as to whether or not be the breadwinner,
Yes.
or whether to be a housewife, right? I feel like that's still something that's being talked about to this day, which is crazy to me.
I despise that term.
Yeah.
Because it carries such a negative connotation.
Right. And I feel like somewhere out there, if we searched Twitter, you'll have like, you know, hashtag proud to be a house husband. You know what I mean? Things.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So, but you have like these organizations that are heeding to that call, and they're doing everything in their power to make it easier for a female to actually have that balance between work and life. It's not easy. And
it's
I feel
not
like
easy at all.
we definitely need more of these types of movies where they kind of expose that. And this kind of connects me to something that I was reading on Twitter kind of several weeks ago, and I just never got the chance to talk about it. You have J.K. Rowling, who's been, I don't even know, on this trail of fire, just trying to cancel culture because, you know, Twitter's trying to cancel her. I don't know if you know anything about this, but in the past, I don't know, 3-4 weeks, she's been getting like a whole lot of shit from like the transgender.
Oh, she's been receiving a lot of hate mail
from like,
specifically on Twitter. Yeah.
Because of her recent comments on gender. Stars from like the Harry Potter franchise have rallied against her in support for transgender people. J.K. Rowling, she actually wrote an essay to explain what she meant in detail. And this is something that she actually wrote. She wrote, "Months later, I compounded my accidental like crime by following Magdalene Burns on Twitter. Magdalene was a immensely brave young feminist and lesbian who was dying of an aggressive brain tumor. I followed her because I wanted to contact her directly, which I succeeded in doing. However, as Magdalene was a great believer in the importance of biological sex and didn't believe lesbians should be called bigots for not dating trans women with penises, dots were joined in the heads of Twitter trans activists and the level of social media abuse increased." And that's kind of what she's been going through. And I feel like, you know, we're in this shades of gray time. People, I feel, are also kind of afraid to express themselves.
Yes.
But I really do enjoy that J.K. Rowling is kind of holding on to what she's saying. She's not being, I feel, bullied to kind of take upon a position. She's kind of explaining what she's talking about. And she does so. And a couple of more tweets I want to read. She says, and this is on June 6, 2020, she tweets, "If sex isn't real, there is no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. The idea that women like me, who have been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences is nonsense." I want to know like what you thought about that, if you know anything about it, if you've been following it at all.
So I don't have Twitter, admittedly, but I love J.K. Rowling.
Good. Stay off Twitter.
I actually had Twitter years ago, back when I worked for Microsoft. But after I ended my career there, you know, Twitter closed as well for me. But specifically with J.K. Rowling, I've always admired her. I love her writing style. I love the fact that she's a woman who speaks with conviction, who thinks with conviction. And like you said, she doesn't get stifled by people. She doesn't allow people to, you know, put a damper on how she feels and what she thinks. Whether or not you agree with her opinion, that's irrelevant. But I know a little bit about what's been going on, but not to the point that you do. But I know that over the past couple of years, she's had issues with this, you know, with this transgender community and with people who are, I guess, who don't want to be defined by their respective genders, who remain gender neutral or.
Well, it's more her basically expressing herself that.
Exactly.
yes, you're a female. Again, these are her thoughts. You're a female because you identify as a
Identify as a
female.
female. Uh-huh.
However, it's, to basically have a formerly male, now female, for example, join competition, like female competition. She feels like, well, now we're kind of erasing what biological females, like women, people who were born as females, have been kind of striving for years to do, right?
Yes.
So there's actually an update on this. She wrote, I was very proud to sign this letter in defense of a foundational principle of a liberal society, open debate, and freedom of thought and speech. And I actually read this letter. It's basically them. It's a bunch of people who signed this letter. I feel like they're trying to say we need to cancel culture. We need to be able to, allow people to actually express themselves. And I love this part of the letter. It goes like this. This stifling atmosphere will ultimately harm the most vital causes of our time. The restriction of debate, whether by a repressive government or an intolerant society, invariably hurts those who lack power and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence or wish them away. Like, that's basically the quote from the letter. And I feel like this is great. I love it. This is her saying, I'm starting a war with groupthink mentality, where everyone kind of goes towards one side. And now you have other people who might be detractors that are afraid to actually say anything. They're afraid because they might be canceled.
And we previously have had that conversation. We've alluded to it, the whole like groupthink mentality. Again, it kind of deviates from individuality and originality. We're all people at the end of the day. We're all individuals. We have our own opinions, our own perspectives, our own experiences. The whole point to freedom of speech, I mean, the First Amendment literally gives you the right to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. You shouldn't be reprimanded, or I should say otherwise crucified, for having a different opinion compared to the masses. Like you said, because of her feminist ideologies, because of her pro-women stance, like pro-biological women stance, she's being ousted by the community. She's become a social outcast, a social media outcast in this case, because she's saying, listen, I understand that as trans people, you identify with either my gender or with the male gender. But unless you were born a woman or a man, you can't really understand the experiences that go hand in hand with that specific gender from the very beginning, because of the whole biological component. But again, kind of like this whole, like, going back to this gray area, you don't have to agree with what she's saying, but you should respect the fact that A, she's entitled to her own opinion, and B, her opinion is rooted in the fact that she's a woman and she's speaking on behalf of a biological woman for biological women. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people pretty much just project their own viewpoints onto you.
I also think that, forget about this whole conversation that, her stance about, trans women and all that.
Yeah.
I really feel like that started the real conversation.
Of course.
And
yes.
The real conversation is, we need to allow people to communicate with one another. We
Yes.
need to be able to flesh out bad ideas and maybe turn them into good ideas. The only way we can actually say no to a shitty idea is if we have public discourse.
Yeah, open and honest communication.
Yeah,
transparent communication.
Yeah, like, so if I give you an idea that is so extreme, but for some reason there's like a whole group of people that also believe that what I'm saying is great. Like, for example, if I have a lot of power already in a community and I say something that's really extreme, right? And I have these fans that just abide by any word that I say and they follow everything that I'm saying, and it becomes the majority viewpoint, this extreme ideology. Well, now people might be afraid to kind of play devil's advocate and question it, right? So that becomes now the law. And now people are going to get canceled because I have all these followers, all these fans, these people that they haven't questioned it themselves. And that's what I'm really against. We need to be able to attack bad ideas, and we should not be afraid to have conversations. We should not be afraid of just allowing people to say what they need to say.
And I completely 100% concur with that entire assessment. You said one key word, question. So Socrates, one of my favorite philosophers ever, he was the Greek philosopher who pretty much, catapulted this world of philosophy. And his teachings had to do with questioning everything and everyone and not accepting anything that you heard or read or saw with your own eyes at face value. That life was meant to be dissected and analyzed and questioned. That's why we were born as individuals with our own brains, with our own minds. We were born with a clean slate, and then our experiences, our teachings, our cultural upbringing, our own methodologies, all that kind of like cultivated us into the people we are today. And, he pretty much advised the young students, the young people of Athens, to question everything, to not accept what the government said as irrefutable truth. And of course, he ended up dying for it. But he was a man with conviction, comparable to J.K. Rowling. And again, going back to this whole thing of questioning everything, I believe that as a society, we end up getting molded into this, again, groupthink mentality. We either join the masses or we become social outcasts.
It's social media, Cleopatra.
Yes, and it is social media.
That's what's happening.
Yes, social media is both good and bad, but unfortunately it is very polarizing. It marginalizes people who don't agree with the masses, who have, who say something that may contradict with, the modern day narrative. So if you say something that doesn't fit into the most popular narrative of today's world, then guess what? You're the bad guy. You get ousted. You get crucified. You're automatically not a supporter of this group or that group. You're evil, essentially. You're subhuman. You're not a person with empathy.
And you know what's funny?
It sucks. I don't fucking understand it at all.
But just to carry what Socrates was saying, I mean, George Carlin, right? Someone that has been on the main front of comedy over the past, I don't know, like 50, 60 years. I mean, the man was a comic genius, right? He would always, he would not only make us laugh, but he'd always make us think. He would always say, and again, George Carlin, I feel he was more liberal than conservative. I think he probably would have identified himself as liberal. He would always say, and here we go. He says, governments don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. This is against their interests. They want obedient workers, people who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept it. I mean, he also said, don't just teach your children to read. Teach them to question what they read. Teach them to question
everything.
To question everything, in my mind, really, it's a very liberal idea. Question government, question everything.
Oh, it's inherently liberal for sure.
Yeah, and to see J.K.
But it's not
Rowling,
widely exercised by people.
but to see the liberal community kind of say, no, let's not question everything, or you know what? No, let's just question everything conservatives do, but let's not question ourselves.
Yes,
it's a mind fuck. It's mind boggling. I don't get it.
Like you said, it's completely mind boggling. And I'm happy that you mentioned George Carlin, because I loved him. I think he was an amazing stand-up comedian and guy overall. And I have to just put these two quotes out there. They're actually two of my favorite quotes by him. So one verbatim, it kind of like, it can be insinuated into this conversation because it has to do with language, which leads to communication. So one of my favorite quotes by him verbatim is, by and large, language is a tool for concealing the truth. So we're talking about establishing and maintaining open, honest, and transparent communication, bringing out every idea to light and then trying to weed out the bad from the good and trying to get a consensus on what we should do as a society for the betterment of everybody, not just specific groups or not just the 1% versus the 99%, But on the flip side, manipulative language is dangerous as well, because if you're cunning and you know how to manipulate language, you can easily persuade anybody to believe what you say without conducting further research on the situation. They automatically take what you say, again, not with a grain of salt, but at face value.
But that's part of it.
Exactly.
But that's kind of what debate is all about, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
If you can have a civil debate and you can convince people that your point makes more sense than the other person's point, then
you win the debate. You win
I'm
the
fine
round.
with, yeah, I'm
Exactly.
fine. I'm completely fine with that because there was a debate. People weren't attacking each other. They were listening to one another and they were retorting to ideas.
But a debate is contingent on facts, though, not so much, not opinion. And I was on the debate team back in high school. So I know you couldn't argue something based on opinion. You had to be very, very straightforward, very concise, and very fact-based when it came to anything that you used and said debate. You couldn't just say, oh, in my opinion or from my experiences. No, you had to argue the facts.
And Twitter is the complete opposite of that, right?
Which is why I don't have Twitter.
but it's crazy because if you think about social media, it's not, you already know what I'm going to say, but
yes,
you have people on Facebook and on Twitter, they're not debating, they're fighting each other. They've made up their minds and now they're just pushing comments, right?
And that's putting it nicely. That's actually putting it nicely.
Because there's a much more toxic way of describing what Facebook and Twitter is on that environment, but it's super insane. I also wanted to talk about Jenna Marbles. I don't know if you know who Jenna Marbles is. She's on YouTube, or she was on YouTube. I honestly considered her the queen of YouTube for such a long time. She basically last week, I believe, canceled herself.
She quit YouTube because she ended up facing...
She canceled herself.
Yeah, she canceled herself completely.
So in 2011 or something, 10 years ago, she had these problematic videos and she has since deleted them and apologized for them. But if you follow Jenna Marbles, you know that she has grown over the years. She's not who she was 10 years ago. She's grown. She has recognized the errors of her ways. She's been able to have conversations about it. But here we are now, and she's canceling herself because she feels like it's just never going to be enough. People are never going to forgive her. They're never going to forget because, again, what is the internet? The internet is permanent. It is for sure permanent. It's never going away, and people won't let you forget. So how does that work? In a country like America that has so many problematic roots, what's the solution here? Do we have civil conversation and try to learn from it? Or we just always remember and never forgive? Do we never forgive? Are we supposed to be an unforgiving nation? Are we supposed to be an unforgiving people? Is that what's happening? Because if people like Jenna Marbles, who have, I believe, really grown through these years, just can't be comfortable with having her own opinion out there and having a livelihood without being reminded of things that she's done, what is there left for the smaller people out there? How are job interviews going to go? Where maybe you work for a year for the new company and they find out something that you did 10, 15 years ago. Is that fair? What do you think?
No, it's completely unfair. I think there should be a statute of limitations and, that should take effect. I don't think that, I'm 32 years old. I'm definitely not the same person I was, say, 10 years ago when I was still in college. You and I have known each other since 2009, actually. So 11 years to be precise. I don't think I'm the same person. I think in my own way, I've matured. I know who I am. I'm more comfortable with the person I am. If I'm in the wrong about something, I'll profusely apologize and admit to being in the wrong. But again, like you said, as adolescents, as teenagers, we all say and do stupid things. Sometimes we don't understand the long-term or even short-term ramifications of our actions. We don't understand that our words can be either positively or negatively impactful to another individual or to a group of, a specific group of people, whether it's ethnically driven or racially driven, or if it's gender oriented, it doesn't matter. I'm not who I was. You're not who you were. So I don't think that we should be held accountable for our stupid adolescent selves. I don't think so. If I said or did something, say in the last year or 2 years, that's a little more justifiable. You could say, all right, you're still that person more or less. So you should be held accountable for what you said, for what you did. But 10, 15 years ago, no, I think it's preposterous. I think it's mind-boggling that people are digging so deeply into people's pasts. Again, when you're a teenager, you know nothing. You know shit about the world. You really have no experiences. You're still finding yourself. You're still you're mentally and physically and emotionally maturing.
Also,
to see this.
The prefrontal cortex is developing until the age of 25.
Yes. Yes.
Right? And that's the part of your mind that makes the decisions, right? So I tend to agree with what you're saying. I think that there are extreme situations when people might do things, more than say, just might do things, and maybe that they shouldn't be forgiven for life. Like, for example, if you're 15 and you kill someone, you should be in jail for the rest of your life. And I guess think about it, because to be put into a free society, I don't know if I could trust you again. But if you say something and it might not be the most popular opinion, or it's super offensive, maybe not at the time, but it is super offensive, and people are kind of waking up to it years later, well, we should kind of take into consideration what the time was and kind of look into society. How was society functioning as a whole? Because look at it this way. If we keep going at this rate, you're going to have TikTokers in 10 years being canceled for sure. I feel like all of TikTok, the entire TikTok community is going to get canceled because the shit that they're putting out there is just insane. I don't know if you're on TikTok, but it's absolutely
Yes, I am. Unfortunately, I am. I succumbed to peer pressure and downloaded TikTok.
But what do you think though? I feel like
it's complete insanity. It's it's hysterical because I feel like
cancellations.
TikTok,
Are we talking about future cancellations here?
Definitely future cancellations, future subscriptions, future cancel everything, because there are so many people who say whatever they want to say without understanding that, guess what, motherfucker? What you just said will have long-term ramifications for you. You could potentially lose your job.
Just the pure irony of everything is that TikTok is actually getting canceled by the government.
Yes.
Because
China, was it China? China banned the use of TikTok.
Wasn't it a Chinese?
Oh, no, sorry. It's a Chinese app, and I think it was India. I apologize. I think India banned the use of the app.
And now the Trump administration
wants to do the same.
Wow.
What was it? I think it was like maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago. There was a girl who got in trouble on TikTok. She said something that wasn't in line with a lot of people. And she pretty much made a threat, an open threat to people who disagreed completely with her mentality. She said something along the lines, I will kill you. I will,
Jeez.
It's really, I forget exactly what happened, but basically she lost her job over it. She was accepted into one of the big accounting firms over in England, over in the UK actually, and they caught wind of what she said on TikTok, which was essentially a threat, again, on social media.
But that's more recent.
It is more recent.
So I get that.
I'm okay with that. Okay with that because A, it's recent. B, this is the person you currently are, not the person you were 10, 15,
Cancel her.
5 years ago. And yes, and I remember after she got rejected from her job, she posted another video, a follow-up video with crocodile tears streaming down her face.
Oh no.
But playing the victim. And she was like, "No, how could you guys do this? You guys were threatening to kill me and have
I've changed.
Like, fuck you, I'm not gonna change. I'm gonna say what I say, do what I do. This cost me my job. Yes, you know what cost you your job? Your fucking mouth. Not the people who went after you on social media.
Yeah, your mouth today.
Yes, your mouth today. Not your mouth from like 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I'm okay with those types of
cancellations
and cancellations. Yes, I'm not okay with holding people accountable for what their 20 something year old selves did. It's a little weird. I think again there should be a statute of limitations in order. But that's just me. You don't have to agree with me.
No, I think I do agree with you. But I will say this, Cleo. I think we are nearing the very end of the show. We spoke about a lot of things. I feel it was a pretty packed episode. I want to thank you for finally being on this episode or being on this show. Is there anything you want to plug really quickly, like 10 seconds? Because we really...
Sure. I just love the fact that everything kind of snowballed just by mentioning Harley Quinn. So my affinity for cosplay made this tonight's episode happen.
Absolutely.
So you're welcome.
Thank you. Guys, everyone listening, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please subscribe and take care.